Okay, hi everyone. My name is Timothy Kazuo Steains, and I'm here with Reina Takeuchi,
Hi.
who's a Nikkei Australian artist and performer and researcher. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself a little bit, Reina, and the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, definitely. Hi everyone. It's lovely to meet you wherever you're listening to this from. I am a Japanese and Australian artist and researcher. Mainly my practice focuses around like the curatorial and dance making, but also I've been sort of delving into different ways of kind of documenting, I guess, dance processes and performative action through sound and photography, as well as video and moving image. So those are kind of the main sort of points of my practice at the moment. And writing is also a really huge part of that. So a lot of the work that I do does focus around the writing of about performance or interviewing different dance makers and artists, as well as sort of articulating like cultural lineage through performativity and writing. Yeah, that's
Mm.
really.
And can you maybe say just a couple of things? I do want to talk about that stuff, because that's super interesting. Can you maybe say something quick, briefly, just about your like family's migration history?
Yes, for sure. I am half Australian, half kind of Euro Australian and half Japanese. So my mum is from um, Western Sydney and grew up near Kellyville and that area. And she was studying Japanese translation at Sydney Uni, and then
Mm.
uh, basically went to work in Japan and study. And there she met my dad, who is a journalist, or he was a journalist with Asahi Shimbun in Japan, and now he's currently working with the Asian Development Journal and a few universities over in Tokyo. So a part of the journey of kind of coming to Australia has been during while he was a journalist, we were living in Thailand and India, and kind of coming in and out of spaces within Southeast Asia as a part of sort of I guess, the experience of working in kind of diplomatic relations and journalism. And my mum was very keen to sort of bring me back to Australia and sort of I guess form that connection with land and with the Australian sort of vernacular. And that's sort of been where I guess I've been trying to reconcile like being here and also finding people like yourself and other sort of Japanese and Australian kind of diaspora, I guess,
Yeah,
and where like our stories are held. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Have you found that process of trying to connect with diaspora here and communities here? Yeah, have you found it difficult, or yeah, what has been your experience of that?
It's definitely really interesting. I was living in North Sydney for a little while
Okay.
and originally when we came back to Australia, my mum and I were living in Queensland, in far north, sort of southeast Queensland, and that was basically the idea about sort of connecting with some of those, I guess, Asian migrant histories or any of that sort of stuff was very much not on the table. I mean,
Mm.
and actually, interestingly enough, the only times I really encountered a lot of other Japanese Australian people was actually in the water, like when I went out surfing and this kind of stuff,
Mm.
because I think that's a major part of why a lot of Japanese migrants are along the coastline. But
Mm.
since coming to Sydney, I feel like it's been a journey of like actually kind of massaging like the different connections that have come up within sort of like Japanese Australian youth sort of circles, and also I guess finding other artists that are working in Sydney that have a practice that spans across kind of like not even just Japanese, but the Asian sort of Asian and Southeast Asian diaspora as well, which has been really nice. Like I think even though
Mm.
it's just different points of connection, I guess. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, fascinating. And so you mentioned the sort of cultural lineages that are interesting to you for your practice and your research. And so, yeah, how do you explore those things in your work? And are they sort of related to Japan or not necessarily?
They're not necessarily. I mean, I do think there is a lot of kind of language that comes in from sort of the Japanese perspective, and it's sometimes really unconscious. Like especially while I was studying at university, I didn't make that much of an effort to touch on the Japanese cultural lineage. But then
Mm.
when I actually look back at it now, and I'm a few years out of that institutional space,
Mm.
um, I look at the works, I'm like, oh, actually, that's really like, I see that and I think of this temple, or I think of these artists that are working with, um, specific sort of Japanese cultural traditions. And I kind of realize that it is very present there, but sometimes
Mm.
it can be submerged and quite hard to articulate, especially when you're working within like a Western institution or situation. It's something that can be hard to talk about directly.
Mhm.
Um, but I would definitely say I'm speaking to it much more deliberately and with what much more nuance now. Um, a major part of it has also kind of been looking at even like specific kind of cultural practice with reference to like Shintoism and sort of Buddhist rituals. A lot of the way that I've kind of noticed that the way that I like to um, do really simplistic performances or ritualistic sort of gestures
Mm.
actually does have a really strong connection with those types of spaces, and
Mm.
even like offerings within the home and that kind of whole thing is really uh, things that come up even if you don't realize it. And I do think there is a specificity in the way that um, even if you're not someone who's practicing using language um, from a Japanese perspective,
Mm.
that all the little things around food and ritual and
Mm.
ceremony are still going to come through, I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so is ritual kind of a part of your sort of performance work as well? And like how is ritual significant to you as like a performance or maybe in an embodied way or as an artwork?
I would definitely say that that ritual is really I mean, I think that for me it's like an anchor through which
Mm.
we might anchor a performance or a dance, because for me, like, and this is something that I'm still kind of figuring out how to articulate and talk about, but it's kind of like it through the ritual of say doing a specific gesture, you realize that um, that ritual or that movement has been done by generations of different practitioners
Mm.
or people that you know maybe didn't even practice in performance. It was just like it's a specific sort of point in time that you're speaking to, I think. And yeah, I guess ritualistic gestures and kind of modes around that are something that I definitely think is quite compelling, especially when working with different types of choreographers. We understand ritual differently depending on where culturally your perspectives are from. So yeah, some things can be very like very clear, like even, I don't know, being on one's knees or something like that. That's and then depending on the context, it can shift. So I feel like yeah, there's something I think playing in that. And actually, it was really interesting last night. I came across an interview from Min Tanaka, who was kind of the founder of the movement called Body Weather, and that was coming from some of the Buto traditions. And he discussed like kind of seeing Kazuo Ono and a few of kind of the legends of Buto as he's gone along. And originally Hijikata, I think, who was kind of the founder of Buto, he actually, a lot of the movement foundations were coming from actually observing old men and women working in fields in Japan, and then some of that movement vernacular, these really slow kind of like, and like sort of almost grotesque movements, like in terms of kind of shriveling up and all that stuff, has now become codified as Buto, but actually it's part of a ritual, it's part of a specific trajectory, which I think that even it's so hard to articulate, but it's really lovely to come across how some of these movements that have become so codified can actually have like kind of come from a place.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me. Do you mind if I like just bring your website up just to put up some images while I ask you another question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm trying to be like technologically advanced.
I feel so bad. This the website really hasn't been updated that recently.
Oh no, that's okay. Can you see it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right, I've got it right. And yeah, so I mean, just as a kind of like, this, I guess it's a very layman's kind of question. Your kind of like dance and embodied sorts of performances seem so kind of like liberating, right? Or there seems that you sort of dance with such abandon. I don't know, can you maybe say something about like, yeah, the sort of embodied experience of your performances, and what they mean for you?
It's tricky to talk about. I think I've always had a big fascination in sort of like, I guess I've gone through a few different stages now, but materiality is like a huge part of sort of my work. And when I'm thinking about performances, I usually think about a texture or of like a prop or some kind of sculptural element. I find when I watch performances, that's usually the thing that really hooks me in. And this is, I mean, this has sort of come in and out of sort of looking at a lot of other Eastern traditions that have looked at the way our bodies are connected to natural elements. So even with Japanese like Gutai movement, which was like, I think it might have been a pre-war movement. I shouldn't say things that I'm not sure about, but I basically it was these sort of men that would dance in mud, and they would like do these incredible patterns, and then they would dry the mud and it would become a painting, so it's like these practices of something that is of the earth and of and quite ephemeral becomes something that's quite solid and can be utilized in different ways. I think with some of these works I've been really interested in, especially coming from a very ephemeral way of maybe not ephemeral, but a peripatetic way of existing. um, I've been sort of interested in how much I can actually um, use that isn't actually of it's not necessarily a tangible object. Like I think some of my practice has been sort of if I use one object in a performance or in a work, then it's really committing to maximizing that object as much as I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of artists that do love using a lot of materials and everything, and I really appreciate that. But I think for me, as I've gotten older, it's gotten a lot more how much can I actually just use and commit to using one material,
Mm.
and I kind of go in and out of modes of that. So like some of the performances have mainly been with water, or there's like one I did like a few years back, which was just with tea leaves, and yeah, so it's kind of I guess using something really simple to activate a somatic experience, and then how can that somatic experience be shared with the viewer, or become something that that viewers can come into. Yeah, that's mainly been a lot of my preoccupation, I guess, for the last few years. But it's also been a lot of collaboration. Like I think dancing and working with dancers, we're automatically working in a really collaborative atmosphere. So it's I think something that's been really exciting for me is just pushing collaborations as much as possible, and whether it's with musicians or designers, and yeah, those all of those parts have been really. Um, I find like that I always learn something new from the people that I work with. Mm.
Great. And I guess writing is a different experience again, both in terms of like your own relationship to your work through the writing and the way that you bring in the audience through your writing too. Yeah, can you say a little bit about what that is like for you?
Yeah, it's actually shifted quite a lot over the last maybe year or so, which has been really fascinating for me. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe it's not that interesting, but
Well, I'm interested in the topic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that I've kind of been looking at specific sort of memories that have anchored me back to kind of homeland. Specifically like experiences from Japan that I had with my dad, and I've been writing about them, and then I've been thinking about how I can introduce that into dance as well. So um, I've been doing a couple of projects around sort of looking and navigating those familial memories, but also um, I've been doing a fair bit of writing, kind of interviewing different dance artists, and uh, also sort of encouraging some friends to send voice recordings to me, and then I'll make like a sound score or something like that for a performance through that process. So I think writing is definitely, it kind of blends between poetry and like I guess magical realism, or personal narrative, as well as it becomes a collaborative space as well, because I get encouraged, or I love to encourage my friends to sort of send me a few things, and then, or like I've kind of worked on a few collaborative articles with other practitioners lately, and yeah, it's been a really nice way of almost reframing some of the dance traditions into something that's tangible, I guess. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, wow. And do you do sort of academic writing as well, or do you do your own kinds of research?
I do academic writing as well. So
Yeah.
I graduated from my master's
Mm.
what would have been last year, end of last year anyway. And then I've started my PhD, and it's kind of like it'll be, yeah, I guess a lot of writing for that. But
Mm.
yeah, I've been trying to sort of look at publishing in different ways, but I guess I find it what I find more interesting is like being able to kind of come in and out of like more provocative, like score-based writing, like kind of poetic references, and then but then also kind of how can the academic or the I guess the essay structure come into that as well. Like, yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a really great, interesting challenge, you know, especially because all academic writing I do is so kind of like
yeah, yeah.
boring and straight down the line.
That's it. Yeah, and I was looking at actually this. I think Liminal has recently done like a call out for a new nonfiction prize, and
Mm,
I loved reading what they put as a part of that the call out, which is like we want you to sort of like push the boundaries of what you think nonfiction is, or what you think
mm,
like it is to just have something that's quite like plain and supposedly structured. I
mm,
think, yeah, the most exciting writing for me is uh, sort of reading things that come in and out of yeah, personal narrative or embodied kind of like uh, embodied writing, I guess.
mm,
Yeah, there's a few dance practitioners who write, or there's a few actually in Sydney as well. Even Angela Go and other people who are kind of working across like a cross-cultural space. They write a lot about their dance practice, but also it's kind of like goes into fiction, but it comes in and out of that. So I think there is something there in terms of what people are doing. Maybe I guess with every artist they end up wanting to kind of come out of or find different ways of like articulating what they're doing through different modes, even if you're a painter or someone that specifically works in one medium, it gets stagnant after a while, and then you have to try and enliven what it means for yourself and excite yourself again. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
and for your like your writing or your performance, like do you, I guess, do you ever kind of feel this like interest in sort of framing your work as kind of Asian Australian or Japanese Australian, or do you find that an awkward kind of thing to do or think about for your own work? Yeah, is that kind of like a framing that you sort of think about? You know,
Oh,
if you're writing for Liminal or even for your own PhD. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think I'm still thinking through. Um, I think that a big part of it has been hmm, has been working with Foray Center for
Mm,
Contemporary Asian Art, and kind of actually really taking like basically the organization has um, it's like it's been born out of a desire to eliminate like racism or sort of uh, Asian sort of ostracization or ostracization of Asian voices, and that's really encouraged me to sort of look at those perspectives and really delve into what it means to be Asian Australian. But it's something that I think y- if you think too hard about it, then it becomes massive. You know, it's kind of
yeah.
like that feeling of even like eco anxiety. Like I feel like there's becomes like an identity anxiety as well when you think too much about um, really speaking to some specific uh, cultural lineage or cultural identity. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I find that I find that difficult too, especially, you know, as a mixed race person, how kind of like complicated and non-linear like my relationship to heritage is. And I agree with you completely that there's this kind of feeling of it, you know, speaking on behalf of an Asian identity or speaking as an Asian person or a Japanese person, you know, is quite complicated and
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think also it's hard to put words around what being Asian is. Like is it just a construct that we adhere to or think about, or is it something connected with language, or is it purely like a genetic physical thing? Like it's something that I find interesting, especially yeah, being mixed race myself, and
mm,
acknowledging that um, my mom has like so many more nuances. It being even being having been working in Japan, but also being Euro Australian or like English Australian. It's so interesting for me because I feel like there's always these slippages and gaps when you're not necessarily like living within a certain culture. So I feel like there's a moments for me where I'm like, oh, I wish that I understood more. I wish I got understood what I was trying to sort of think about without necessarily having to say that I'm living in Japan. And I think that's also come up with a few other friends. Like I have a friend who he's also a dance practitioner, but his partner works in international relations. And
mm.
this my friend, the dancer, he's Filipino, and when they traveled to the Philippines, his partner could speak Tagalog so much so much better than him. But it was just because like his work is anchored in, you know, working in spaces in Southeast Asia. So it's yeah, it kind of causes a little bit of like self yeah, self criticism, and a lot of yeah, I guess it humbles you in some ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But those are interesting connections too, aren't they? And I feel like, you know, and some of those interesting questions seem really kind of there in your work and really kind of beautifully illustrated, even if there's no kind of like hard answers to those tensions.
yeah. Thank you. I think that that's something that yeah, I'll probably I kind of just want to continue delving into. And I think um, I'm I feel quite fortunate because I am sort of working within a space that really is supporting that investigation into identity. But then I think finding moments to sort of let it go and just let a work speak to what it's speaking to, and then coming back and looking at, okay, well, this work definitely has this influence coming in, but at the time maybe it didn't feel like right to sort of to push that influence too much. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of things where especially I think people working in contemporary visual arts, they're like they don't really acknowledge that something is about a certain thing until they have some breathing room from it.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the same with a lot of practices, like even writers and yeah, yeah, a few different things. Mm.
yeah, that's a really fascinating point.
Mm.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you so much for talking to me.
No, this has been so nice. Yeah, thank
Yeah, it's really
you.
great to connect with you. And hopefully we can connect again in the future
Yeah, completely.
as well.
Sounds great.
All right, thanks very much.
Well, thanks so much, Jim. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.